Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, a citizen of the universe and a passage keeper and mentor for our new Earth children. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality, and it is meant to embody deeper trust and ways into solid self-love and fearless integrity. Our new world energy of spirit babies needs us to consciously create within conception, trust pregnancy, and have freedom to birth and parent from innate wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 204, January 2025. True heart connections, boys staying intact is how nature intended. Is it really necessary to take away a body part that has a purpose? What does it mean psychologically and spiritually to circumcise males? Who will advocate for the infant? So this episode, hot topic, to circumcise or not to circumcise. And I feel like 2025, aren't we being, initiated into less censorship, whatever that means, right? Because we know there can be an illusion around that, of course, in social media. And why I say this could be triggering, it could be a hot topic, but I feel like we have to expand, right? And speak up in different areas of conception, pregnancy, and birthing. And how are we advocating our freedom as parents, as connecting with our children to do the least amount of harm, I would say, right? To provide that connection of health and wellness, and of course, more than anything, love. And even as I say that, it's not about blaming, right? It's we are many of us could be very ignorant in our parenting. I say we because I don't think that anybody is separate from that. That we all have made mistakes, that we all can do better at different times, right? And what I mean by different times is it's not about living under the stress of like, I suck and I'm never going to be the best parent. Like, I can go back now and look at all the years and some things I'm like, I wish I would have done it differently. And I only knew how to do that under, my own level of thought process and how I was raised. And more than anything, I feel like everything really does come back to our own childhood and our own connection to our nervous system. And, I feel like parents, some mothers, fathers may feel like they've had different upbringings in their family and they follow traditions or through religion, right? So it's just, oh, I'm just doing it because that's just what we do. But we have to question everything, right? We have to take a pause, question, and listen to different sides of the story and still advocate what feels best for us. And I want to just kind of paint you this beautiful image, this picture, baby being in the womb space, so whole, just working with the placenta, like thriving. Baby being knows how to thrive, and maybe baby's a breech baby, maybe baby's like starting to move around, getting ready to be birthed, coming out into this world. Baby being knowing how to regulate their own heart, their brain, their digestion, their organs fully formed in that synergistic plasma of liquids, of life, of biology. And baby being comes into this world, birthing how they're birthed into this world, physiological birth, vaginal birth, maybe cesarean surgical birth. Both are different kinds of births, and I'm not going to glorify one or the other. I do want to glorify actually vaginal birth, but I'm also not going to pretend that cesarean births is just a different, experience. I feel like there's a lot of words going around. Like it's really, I think we have to be really careful with our words because I believe people were saying, I saw some reactions in the world of social media that it is just I forgot the word now. It's like not a variation of birth, but it was almost like a celebration. And I think we have to be really careful with that because a cesarean birth isn't a celebration. There's such levels of loss and trauma that a mother has to go through to deliver her baby in that way. And so that's probably a whole other episode. But, baby being coming into the gloriness of this world, taking their first breath, crying out. Everybody wants to hear the baby cry to feel like, oh, they're here. The liquid's coming out of their watery world into this world, which feels so vulnerable. My skin is cold. I feel the lights. I can feel people's pressure in their hands. And baby being is just in their internal energy and intelligent biology is seeking my source where I came from. Where is my source? Coming from the body of mother. Like, where is my source? Where do I go? And needing that connection. And that's, the holding. Maybe there's even a little rubbing. Maybe there's just a wrapping in a blanket and putting it right on the chest, right? Right there. And just bonding and connecting. This is the dream. This is the idea of births for all humans, right? But it gets interrupted because baby beings are pure unless there's some massive medical issues. Babies don't need much. They come out into the world. Do they need dabbling? Do they need ointments? Do they need injections? Do they need body parts cut off? Do they need to be poked for blood tests? What do they? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Can we just stop a minute? And what I'm saying is a truth. We've seen this happen. Like, what is the over dabbling, the getting in there, the infant experience? And you can look at the studies here. You can talk to the voices of mothers and fathers, babies that are born with less dabbling and touching and they are different. They are different energy coming into this world. They are trusting of their body. Nobody's taking their body away. And guess what? That information is imprinted. Those very moments of birth, birthpsychology.org. Follow the science. It's been around for a very long time, and I'm very passionate about the infant and the psychology of the infant. Why? Because not only am I a spirit baby medium, I can hear the newborn speak through energy to me. And I've worked with many of different babies, some unfortunately that had to go to the NICU, and bridging the energetic conversation with that baby's environment. What are they getting and what are they asking of their parents? I had a baby once saying, I really need to smell my mom. So what can you do? You getting cloth and rubbing it on your boobs, rubbing it on your body, any little part that just brings that connection. It's nature. Babies want nature and connection. And I know it's unfortunate that many babies don't get nature and they get other synthetics and other drugs in their body. And I do feel like, of course, there's a detoxing, there's still healing. So maybe you're just going, oh my gosh, like I've done all these different interventions. I didn't mean to. It's, we can't move into like terror of like, I'm a horrible person and parent, right? It's like, oh my gosh, this happened. What is this connection? And how do I heal it? How do I heal it? How do I detox this energy in the foundation to then bring healing space? There's so many beautiful healing things to do, but I know I'm going off now into I wanted you to paint this picture of baby being coming into the world of nature, right? And then there's all this dabbling, all this baby needs something, intervention, intervention, intervention. And some will say, no, no, that's okay. But if you've been in the birth psychology field, it's not okay. And some people don't realize as adults, and I've called it the inner infant, is still with us. And if we've had foundational traumas, it's a really big healing. It is something that you have to work on your whole life. It just doesn't go away. And I know that's some of the stories for many of people, actually, many of adults, being curious about how you were born. And so now you've birthed your baby, and we're going to go into your son. How about your son? and the conversations of circumcision. It's a really big area that we are in battle with, right? Around the world, even different cultures have different ideas. And the reason why I wanted to do this episode was because one of my students who's deeply in the field of the energetics, I would even say beyond the energetics, if there's another field of quantum frequency work, she's just been in it for so long. We're very fortunate to have a being like her that exists because she was a midwife and does the same kind of work, but in a different way. And this is it. Like, this is someone who's connected to the New Earth Child and being there of service. And she was like, have you ever done an episode about circumcision? And this was months ago. And I thought, you know what? I have not. And I kept thinking I was going to talk about when is the right time. You know how that works. You pick the fruit off the tree. Is it ready to eat or not? Is it ripe? And then I felt like we started Spirit Baby Radio in January. I hope you heard the most recent episode where it was about health and wellness, fertility with the most beautiful heart warriors who I feel like are very advocate for body autonomy, body advocacy, and being action oriented in our heart space to heal. So, this episode, there's going to be more episodes that I'm going to be calling maybe even Spirit Baby Unplugged, just to go into these conversations about babies and birth certificates, free birthing. What is the system doing to birthing? We need more and more conversations to infiltrate this reality, right? This earth reality, because the old needs to go, the old needs to die, the new needs to come through and create less trauma. I want to say trauma free and no trauma, but baby steps. So this is how this episode really came to creation. And there's a lot on circumcision if you were to Google it, right? And I want to share that this I thought was very interesting. It's a brief history of circumcision. And this is from a website called socalcircumcision.com. And inside the anti-circumcision movement, a brief history of circumcision. To understand where our culture is presently on the topic of circumcision, we must first consider the arc of the practice throughout history. Circumcision was long practiced by several cultures like South Sea Islanders, Australian Aborigines, Sumatrans, I'm not saying that right, sorry, Incas, Aztecs, Mayans, and ancient Egyptians. Male circumcision is, in fact, the oldest known surgical procedure dating back to 23 century BCE in Egypt. Traditionally, circumcision was used to symbolize a boy's ascension into manhood. In Judaism and Islam, it is a marker of his faith. If we jump millennia ahead to the 19th century, British royalty began to circumcise their male hairs, which in turn created a social trend to define one's status. By World War II, an estimated 80% of the UK's upper class males were circumcised compared to the 50% working class. So it looks like it even became a status symbol, right? Which a lot of things do, right? It's like, oh, if you're wealth or there's abundance, like, there's that removal. And I guess this is some of history. I'm not super like schooled on the history of, circumcision. And I do know that in the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is the AAP, right? They switched to a neutral position in 1999. That was a long time ago. According to the chair of the task force that reviewed 40 years of data, and I quote here, it's in quotes, circumcision is not essential to a child's well-being at birth, even though it does have some potential medical benefits. So this is interesting, right? It's not essential. I would even add, I'd scratch off that last part, medical benefits. That's if you have an issue with your foreskin, with, the male foreskin. And sometimes, yeah, things at birth, maybe there's some issues, maybe there's actually not. And that's a whole other conversation, right? It's like, where do you intervene or not intervene? It's such a sacred space. It's a creative force. And I know that there are some really Someone was telling me there's this incredible book out there. Now I'm going to tease you because I don't have the name of it, where it talks about the psychology of men and circumcision. Because when you just kind of stop for a moment and think about it, you're cutting off the skin. Yeah, oh, it's a useless skin. It's religious. It's quote unquote, it dirty. It's cleanliness, right? But I don't know about you, but cutting a piece of skin off of your baby that doesn't need to be cut off feels really traumatic for me, actually. And I have boys, by the way, and you're going to know what direction I went in because intuitively I felt like, and I remember my midwife came to me and said, "Are you gonna, what do you want my firstborn?" And I was like, I didn't even consider it or even think about it, actually. I was like, it just do no harm, do no harm. And again, if you did that, yeah, there's harm and forgiveness and love yourself and don't feel like, oh my gosh, because there's something in that. Like, why are we doing this again? Remember the beginning conversation I shared about infants, like doing, dabbling, like, can we back away, take a breath? Like, oh my gosh, unless there's something massively medically needed, it's not necessary, right, to dabble and get in there. So more on this topic I have here, and this is from this resource here. I think it's yeah, the website is no harm, which is 2ms.org. In recent decades, many different groups have rallied support behind what has been coined the inactivist movement. Simply put, inactivists believe in a man's right to choose whether or not to be circumcised. They propose that infant circumcision is a violation of the man's human rights. They argue that this compromises their body integrity and results in a loss of sexual function, sexual satisfaction. They claim deep anger, insecurity, and embarrassment knowing that that part of them has been removed, irreparably removed. So another part of this is psychological effects evidence indicates the ability to learn and remember is present from before birth, and that the newborn infant has fully functioning pain pathways. Therefore, one would expect to find a psychological effects associated with genital cutting of newborns. Changes in infant maternal interaction have been observed after circumcision, including disrupted feeding, weaker attachment between the infant and mother. The American Academy of Pediatric Task Force on Circumcision, as we said earlier, this was also shared that it's not necessary. And the behavior of nearly 90% of circumcised infants have been found to be significantly changed after their circumcision. That's really high. Differences in sleep patterns, more irritability, both signs of stress have been observed among circumcised infants. Now, that's data, and there's research if you want to look at the deeper data. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a normal response to an event in which a person physical integrity has been threatened or violated. Forced genital cutting is a direct experience of sexual violence, so it fulfills the criteria as a psychogenic cause for PTSD. They found that circumcised boys have a much stronger reaction to the pain of vaccines than they do girls and intact non-circumcised boys, which the author suggests as an infant analog of PTSD. That's interesting, right? Other authors have also reported PTSD in circumcised males. Let's see. Hmm. Oh, because it also shares in some psychiatric therapy sessions, it comes up with some men this experience and that connection. And remember, we can even go back. Remember, the infant feels. Back in the 50s, they didn't think infants felt, right? That was the science. This is why we got to be careful with the science, right? Oh, the science said it was just the consciousness of time, right? We're going to go into the collective energy because why would a baby being not have any presence or connection? It's an creature, animal. It's, mammalian, like growing in the body. Of course, there's going to be pain. And so back in the day, they thought, oh, babies didn't feel anything. And then we have somatic psychology that came out, right? Early, you know, trauma. And I'm saying that not to laugh, but it's just okay. Like there's a lot of evidence here that, yeah, what's serving the infant. And maybe you're pregnant with a baby boy, or maybe you're going to have a boy and you're kind of freaked out. I know some people through religion now, it's very powerful, it's very activating. And it's like, but this is what we do, and this is our tradition. There are non-religious brisses, is what they call them. The bris, right, is when they're doing that whole ceremony. But there are ways to do it that don't have to, yeah, take away the parts, right? And there are things to consider if you are, doing the research and questioning, because there's a lot of false ideas that somehow it's dirty. And, there's been a few studies where, oh, there's less, you get penile cancer is lower. But if you're looking at cancer based on a foreskin or cancer based on a biology of energy, and cancer comes through different way. That's a whole other conversation, but you have to question that. Like, is that the reason? Because cancer really scares people, and then they can go, "Oh, I should do this." But here's what I want to challenge you to do. If you're a mother and you're pregnant and you're considering circumcision, I want you to go to med.stanford.edu/newborn/professional, and I'm going to put it in the bio notes, and I want you to watch. There's a video. It's a real video. I could not even fully finish it. I'm not going to lie. My body was tightening up. It felt very uneasy for me to watch. And I think this is really important. That baby is a part of you. And if you're going to do any procedures, you should be a part of that procedure. And not to watch it so you're like traumatized, but you're going to then know what your baby's going through. Your baby isn't shut down to that pain and suffering. Yeah, babies will check out in that pain and suffering because they have to, because they're protecting themselves. And then they do get to heal and repair, and some don't. Some will have deeper psychological scars, spiritual scars, and others will just adapt, and others, yeah, will be unwell, even physically, have physical problems. I had a family member who had a botched circumcision. It was really sad to watch that. Having to be recircumcised at 3 years old, there's a lot of awareness there. And then you have to wonder the impact of their sexual relationship, their energy, their connection. Let's just say it's not positive, actually. So there are mistakes that are even made in a procedure that's not necessary. And we can even, again, watch this video and really sit in your heart and see, is this the way to go? And you have to sit with that. And I did back in the day, as I've shared throughout the years, I attended a bris. But back in the day, years ago, I did infant development therapy for many years. And I'm very open-minded. My clients, I went from Bel Air, housing, all the way to South Central to like barely have any food. I went in the homes of people to help them connect with their infants and their toddlers, and no judgment, right? And I wanted to be very open with where people were, and it allowed me a deep level of compassion and openness. And I still feel like I want to carry that through. But I also have opinions on our infants and what their connection is to this world and how to grow healthy, vivacious, and free from the, minimal traumas, right? And so one of my moms, who I was working with her son, um, had a few other babies, and she invited me to this bris. And I thought, I'm going to bring my husband. I was very curious at the time. I wasn't sure what was involved, and I remember being told to sit in a certain area, and everybody was like, there was a lot of commotion happening. I didn't see what was happening, but then I was really sat back in this row of chairs, and a woman, and this is like true story. This woman turns to me, and they know that I'm not part of this community. Like, I'm not dressed alike. I'm probably like, who is this woman? And And she says to me, she just randomly says to me, not a very probably positive, good experience to tell somebody when we're sitting here and I'm here to support, my client and the mother, and then her baby's up there. And again, I can't see anything. I'm so far away. I'm just corralled in these like seats. And this woman turns to me and says, "You know why they're cutting it off? Because it's all the evil in his body needs to leave." And I had no reaction. I was just like, is this really happening right now? Okay. Did she just say that? Okay. And I just kind of took it in and then I went, and I was a part of rest of um the the eating after the hanging out with the community for a very small amount of time. I wasn't sure where my space was, but I also again was open to that support in that way. But it stayed with me for this was probably, gosh, how many years ago? Could have been 15 or more years ago, but I was really like, oh, like, hmm. So yeah, obviously my experience, like, questioning that and not just looking at male mutilation. I don't know why we don't call it male mutilation because female mutilation is a thing too, which I know some would say, well, female genitalia mutilation is so much more intense because of the way it's done. But I think that any mutilation, look at this word mutilation, any mutilation sounds terrible to me. I mean, I'm not trying to be intuitive and psychic right now. I'm literally just feeling like that's logical. Like, we're not gonna like, do or cut or poke or like what are we doing to help nature? Like, nature doesn't need our help. And this is where we have to back away and see what comes. And this, can be called anti-circumcision movement if you're curious to look into it, or an activist movement. And I do know there's massive energy there. Like I know in a lot of these groups, you may not like it or you may love it. It's very argumentative and it's very intense, but I also feel like there's such a passionate mission, right? To really like put out this energy because in many hospitals, they are still in the practice of it. And some doctors may be lying to us. So well, we don't know what that's like, right? We do know what that's like. Is this really necessary? And tell me why. And more than anything, I know everybody's really big into the research, and there's a lot of research on this, but I really want to push is can you step into your own instincts? Does that actually feel right to do that? And if there is like, oh, this feels right to do, there's some other, probably a lineage energy that you're carrying and some cultural and religious indoctrination. And that's what you have to be careful was because as your own sovereign soul, what is that real connection? Again, it's like baby is natural nature and we do have to like bring this conversation forward because it is important. And we're all always learning about different things, right? And how to validate what we're learning and how to keep those things in our hearts in a way that feel encouraging. And like I said earlier, there's going to be things you're going to make mistakes, right? And again, you can revisit those parts or you can move into deep levels of forgiveness with how you're moving forward and what that is. And again, I know there, again, I feel like there's so many different views because you look at like men that are and aren't, and I don't have the current data. What is the personality? What is the energy of who they are? I feel like here's where I'm going. Great home birth experience. Maybe even a hospital birth can be a great experience as long as there's no dabbling. That's what I'm going to say. No dabbling, intervention, rubbing, stuck, like, keeping baby in their cocoon of energy with mother and just rebuilding, loving, nursing, you know, attachment parenting, co-sleeping, like really just nourishing baby being your son, your daughter into this world in that most really naturalistic way as possible. I feel like that's a thriving human. And so wherever you are, if you're on the fence or if you're like totally like no, and I know in some cultures it's unheard of to circumcise. Like why would you do that? And in other cultures it's like that's what everybody does. And I know there's a psychological argument. I met many years ago when I worked at the university. It was a very huge disappointment when the child psychologist said it's that the penis should match the dad. And I'm like, that sounds ridiculous because what if they don't match? What does that even mean? They have to match. Like, because there's a psychological damage if it doesn't match, that does not even make any sense. And back then, I remember her saying that, and that stuck with me because now, 20 years later, after this woman said this, I'm looking, going, what was she saying? I hope she retracted, no pun intended, her thought idea and process around that. And there's a lot of people I heard back in the day in the psychology field, especially that were like, no, no, there's this thing called elimination communication. No, that's just damaging, or, circumcision. No, it's got to match the father. And it's like, whoa, like, really? Because I want to do better for my children. I don't want them to have the procedures or things that I've been through. And neither does, many of dads have uncircumcised children and they're circumcised. And there's just different stories and conversations around it. That's all. And I think a most beautiful thing a dad could say was that, well, we kept you whole and mine got taken away, and end of story. It's like, we do what we do with what we've been through, our traumas and our deficiencies, and we thrive through it, right? So baby being whole, beautiful, intact. Just do your research. Watch the video. You will be forever changed. And I'm going to say maybe I am an activist. Is that the word I use? I do feel like our males should just keep our babies and children, keep all their body whole and however they are led into the world. And so, yeah, keep that connection, keep, letting our baby boys become really strong, integral, compassionate, powerful men in the most loving and purest way. And that can begin as simple as the way we're born. And I want to thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio, episode 204, True Heart Connections. Boy staying intact is how nature intended. Thank you. Much love. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly Meehan. Please join my community and stay in touch with monthly energy rants, Spirit Baby poetry, and get access to Spirit Baby 101 with tips and practices at my newsletter at newearthchildren.com. And join me on Instagram with lives at Spirit Baby Medium, and join the Mighty Networks, the Spirit Baby Collective membership, and Motherhood to Mediumship. Remember, you are the heart that holds communication, and it is your time to connect. Come share in the great shift of your mind and the true spirit of your heart with Spirit Baby Communication.